Hello, welcome to another episode of HCC MovieMakers Academy Movie Reviews. I'm Trey Dixon.
And I'm Stephen Bent.
And the two of us just saw It Follows. It Follows is the new film from director David Robert Mitchell. It stars Micah Monroe, and it centers on a young girl who finds herself the target of an unknown entity after a consensual sexual encounter.
The movie was shot on a mere budget of just $2 million. So Trey, what did you think about this movie?
Well, it's a very interesting piece of work, and I think its strongest suit lies in its ability to take standard horror movie conventions and sort of turn them on their head. Like, for example, everybody's familiar with the horror trope. If you see two people having sex, then
bad things will happen.
Bad things will happen. Mike Myers or Jason Voorhees will sneak up on you and stab you with a machete or a knife. So this movie manages to take that idea and throw it to the extreme, where these characters are literally in danger because they had sex. So that's one of many tropes that this movie manages to take and repurpose in ways that make it sort of, different and, original. It's very well done. It's very engaging. I wouldn't necessarily say that this movie is scary.
I'd have to agree with you. I think he's marketing as a horror film just to get people to see the movie, but it's really not a horror film at all.
I mean, it does have its moments, and you can tell that they're going for scares, but it's more about what's underneath the surface, and it harkens back to a time when movies had intelligence and had heart and sort of preyed on your emotions more than shock value. Modern horror is essentially taking something that's not in frame and then throwing it in frame accompanied by a loud sound effect. And there's nothing emotional about that. There's nothing scary about that. This movie, even if it's not so scary, I appreciate that it was trying to take its time and trying to do something that wasn't what everybody else was giving us.
And I like when it was scary, he didn't use cheap scares.
No, it's much smarter. It's much smarter than that.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and I'm not the only one who's been saying this, but this movie owes a great deal to the works of John Carpenter, particularly Halloween. When you watch characters walking down those sidewalks and you see the camera just following them slowly, it just screams Halloween.
That's the first thing I thought was Halloween.
And it's interesting to see John Carpenter as something of a year zero, when back in the day he was sort of considered like the death of something. But now a lot of movies are really using John Carpenter as an influence. Adam Wingard, for example, he made You're Next and The Guest, and those movies are huge 80s throwback that owe a lot to the works of John Carpenter. Another movie that I saw recently, probably my favorite film of the year, 71, Jan Damage's 71, starring Jack O'Connell. See that movie, by the way. It's very reminiscent of John Carpenter's Assault on Precinct 13. So I think it's interesting how John Carpenter's movies have actually evolved into what is considered the start of something,
Yeah, but isn't this the director's only second movie?
It's he's probably going to find his voice.
He'll find his vision eventually.
This movie, in its ability to throw back to the 80s is also where my main issue with this film lies, because it feels so much like it's trying to be somebody else's movie.
Interesting.
You know what I mean? Like, it feels like the Black Keys of horror movies. It wants so desperately to exist in the 80s, but it exists here and it exists now. It's a depthful movie that's really engaging and well made, but it also feels like, hey guys, let's go ahead and make an 80s style horror movie, So it's something about that kind of rubs me the wrong way. I don't necessarily have an issue with an artist taking a previous piece of work and then trying to build off of it. Modern art in and of itself wouldn't exist if it didn't build off of previous generations. It just wouldn't. But at the same time, it feels like it's emulating John Carpenter's style so fluidly that it might have just, why not just have him direct it,
Yeah.
So that's probably my biggest issue, is it just feels like somebody else was making it and not this director.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. It did feel like a John Carpenter movie like you were talking about.
Not that there was anything particularly...
There's nothing wrong with that.
Not that there's particularly anything wrong with it. It takes away from the the idea of it being a genuine article, but it's still a very entertaining movie.
But also, who out of all the audience, who's going to catch on to that besides
diehard horror fans?
Big, yeah. Okay, that makes a good point.
When you see the trailers and it says, "Oh, it's the best horror movie in ages," that's because it's critics saying that. Because critics know what good horror movies are. And this movie is a horror film that's made for horror fans who desire an older period. But this is probably not going to fly over well with modern audiences.
Probably not. I think they're going to be disappointed.
Yeah.
They're gonna want a horror film. They're gonna walk out and be like, I really wasn't scared most of the time.
I just got a bunch of people walking around. Just
I can hear them right now.
Just a bunch of people talking and walking around. It was stupid. This movie's stupid. You're stupid for liking this movie. You're stupid. Stupid.
All right. I also want to comment on the on the amazing score of this movie.
Oh God,
I
love
the score. Really helped drive the whole theme of this movie completely.
I love and adore the score for this movie.
As soon as I got home, I downloaded the thing on iTunes. I just had to own it.
Really hoppy, really bouncy, really synthy. Of course, it's when you're gonna go ahead and make an '80s throwback, you start with the score and then work your way back, because anybody can frame a shot like the way that somebody else did it. You can frame a shot like Wes Craven did with Nightmare on Elm Street or what Stanley Kubrick did with The Shining, but it starts with the score, and I like it propels the action, and it's nice and soft and melancholic when it needs to be. It's this director's previous film was the Myth of the American Sleepover.
Not familiar with that one.
Because his movies are, or at least they appear to be, more centered on characters and the relationships that these people have with each other. And while this movie is trying to scare you, it also has softer moments with characters, and it's a nice character piece. And I don't think many people are going to be expecting that.
No, not at all. And you mentioned like framing wise, and I want to talk about the cinematography was yet so simple, but yet so effective in every level.
The best kind of cinematography is the kind of cinematography you can't even notice.
Absolutely.
This movie is very well done in that regard. It non-existent cinematography, really terrific.
I want to say that opening shot really just grabbed me. Just a simple 360 pan.
Yeah, a girl runs out of a house and she sees something coming at her.
She goes back in the house.
You can't see what's coming at her, but you see what's looking at her from whatever's looking at her's perspective, and then she runs back into the house and then drives off.
I was going to ask you that. Do you think he wanted like his cinematography to be the perspective of whatever thing what was following them?
Well,
Did you feel it is that way?
I don't know if that's the case, because the idea behind this movie is when you have sex with somebody, you'll get this weird sexually transmitted haunting, if you will, and this thing will come after you at a walking pace, and only you and people who have had it can see it. Yeah. So every now and again you'll see people talking, and in the background you'll see some random person just slowly walking towards them, and there's tension there.
It's probably the creepiest thing ever. It's really creepy to watch.
I wouldn't say it's creepy, but it's definitely tense.
It creeped me out.
Yeah. Much like what having some sort of horrible disease would affect you and make you paranoid, and it captures paranoia very well.
Absolutely.
So,
and let's do just really quick. Let's talk about the cast.
Okay, I mean, I don't really know any of the other actors except Micah Monroe, who was also in The Guest.
I know none of the cast.
Yeah, Micah Monroe is a particularly good actress. I liked her a lot in The Guest, and I'm thinking after this movie we're going to see her in a lot of more stuff.
Yeah.
I like how subdued everybody was, and I think they were. I wouldn't be surprised if some of these people were non-actors. Because I think the director was trying to go for some sort of genuine feel, and they really captured.
Oh, it was very realistic. I mean, kind of when they were saying their lines, they looked really confused at the dialogue, but it worked because the characters in the movie were confused on this whole venture.
So, in conclusion, I think the two of us really enjoyed this movie. What would you give it out of a scale of 1 to 10?
I'd give it an 8.
8. I'm going to go a little lower, 7.5.
Okay.
It's a very good horror movie. Well, I mean, depending on who you ask.
Yeah, I think it's going to depend on who you ask.
This is a movie that if more horror movies could be like this, then people who watch horror movies would have a higher standard. It's not quite the next great American horror classic.
No.
Or horror classic in general. It's no Babadook.
But I will say it'll probably go down as one of those cult movies that we will hear for decades.
Yeah. So, in conclusion, give it a look. It's worth seeing.
Absolutely.
Thank you for watching HCC MovieMakers Academy Movie Reviews. We love movies, and if you love movies, then check out our website at www.hccs.edu and enroll yourself in the art of filmmaking. Check out our YouTube channel and subscribe if you would like some alerts on more reviews just like this one. As always, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time. We're not.
We got 30 seconds. Or he's keep recording.